The night was quiet, too quiet for Earth's orbit. The stars shone cold above, but one of them flickered like a heartbeat. On a lonely satellite station far above the planet, an astronaut named Rian stared at the strange pulse on his monitor. It was not a star. It was not a planet. It was a signal, shaped like a dragon spreading its wings across the void. At first he thought it was a glitch, some broken code or reflection from the sun, but then the pattern moved. It curled and twisted like something alive. Rian reached for the radio, his voice trembling as he called the control room back on Earth. "Do you see this? Look at Channel 7. There is something there." Down on Earth, thousands of miles away, Dr. Alara Voss sat in a dim research room at the European Space Network. Her screen lit up with the same pattern. She had been studying deep space frequencies for years, looking for signs of alien life, but this was different. The signal was old. The wave sequence matched no known alien technology. It looked like something from a myth. Something ancient. The symbol burned across her screen, a dragon's outline, tail curling, wings spread wide. She zoomed in, and for a moment she swore the eyes of the dragon moved. Governments all over the world received the data, but no one wanted to speak first. It was too strange, too impossible. Dragons were stories told to children, not creatures flying in space. Yet here it was, echoing over Earth's orbit like a whisper from the past. For days the signal pulsed, always the same rhythm, as if calling for something. People began to notice. Amateur astronomers uploaded videos. News channels talked in hushed tones. Some called it a hoax, others said it was a weapon from a rival nation. But Alara knew the truth was deeper. Late at night, she decoded fragments of the transmission. It was not just an image. It was a message. Ancient symbols flickered within the wave. She translated one word at a time. Hear, answer, come. Her heart pounded. Someone or something was asking for a response. But who? And why now? In the orbit station, Rian watched the signal grow brighter. It now filled half the screen, scales of light rippling across the void. Outside his window, Earth looked small, almost fragile under the silent stars. "What do you want?" he whispered, not expecting an answer. But deep in the static, the signal shifted. For the first time it responded, sending a slow rumble through the radio that sounded like a distant roar. On Earth, Alara was woken by her alarm at 3 in the morning. Her computer had decoded a new line. This one was clearer. "Who will come?" She stared at the words, her breath caught in her chest. It was not a warning. It was a call. The next morning, the world governments called an emergency meeting. Screens flickered with nervous leaders, scientists, generals. Some said to ignore it, some said to fire a missile and break the signal before it became something worse. But Alara spoke up. "If we attack without knowing, we may start a war we cannot win," she said, her voice steady but cold. "This is not just a sound. This is a voice from something old. Maybe older than our history." The room fell silent. "How do you know?" a general asked. Alara showed the decoded symbols, the dragon-shaped pattern, the whispering roar that matched no technology they had ever seen. "Because," she said softly, "this is not a machine speaking. It feels alive." For a week, debates raged. Satellites tried to jam the signal, but it only grew stronger, spreading like a web of light across the upper atmosphere. Pilots reported strange shadows in the clouds at night, shapes like wings made of starlight. People grew restless. Religious groups called it a sign of the end. Conspiracy forums claimed the dragons had come back to take Earth for themselves. Through it all, Alara kept working. She sent small bursts of code into the signal, trying to see if anything would respond. Most came back empty. But one night, as rain fell over the silent city, she whispered a simple question into her microphone. "Who are you?" Her voice was soft, almost lost in the storm. But far above the Earth, the signal flared. The dragon symbol twisted, its eyes burning brighter. Across the orbit station, alarms blared as Rian watched the pattern shift into a new form, a dragon head turning slowly, as if searching for the voice that spoke. In that moment, all the satellites around Earth went silent for 3 seconds. Phones stopped. Screens turned black. The world held its breath. And then, in the quiet that followed, a low, ancient voice echoed through the static in a language older than human memory. Ilara heard it in her lab. Rian heard it in orbit. Children dreaming in their beds woke up crying, saying they heard wings. The message was clear, though the words were strange. Only one thing translated perfectly: we are waiting. Ilara's hands shook as she stared at the signal now burning across the night sky. It was no longer faint. It stretched like a shadow of wings over the whole world. The call was no longer just in the machines. It was in the air, the ocean, the bones of the planet. Something was coming. And somewhere, beyond the reach of Earth's telescopes, something huge moved among the stars. For the first time in 1,000 years, the dragons had sent their call, and one human had answered. The signal did not fade. Instead, it spread like a silent storm across the galaxy. On Earth, the skies remained calm, but far away, in a dying star system called Drakkern, the ground began to shake. Cracks opened in the black crust of an ancient world, releasing fumes that had not touched the air for millennia. Deep within the planet, something stirred, something with scales older than the sun's. The echo of the dragon signal had reached them. On Earth, Dr. Ilara Voss barely slept. Every night she sat in her lab, watching the pattern shift and change like living fire. The governments tried to keep control, but their fear was growing. Satellites vanished without a trace when they came too close to the source. Probes sent into the dark returned only fragments of burned data. Rumors spread across the world. Some believed a war was coming. Others said a god was waking. The truth was stranger. In the silence of space, the dragons were listening. Ilara was chosen for a mission. It was not an offer. It was a demand from the higher councils of Earth. "You have spoken to them," said the gray-haired director of the council. "You will go to where this signal comes from and find out what waits for us." She wanted to refuse. Her heart told her to stay on Earth, where it was safe. But something in the message kept calling her. The whisper she heard that night still echoed in her mind: "We are waiting." Within a week, a ship was prepared, a long-range exploration vessel named Horizon Dawn. Its hull was black like the night sky, and its engines were built for stealth and speed. A small crew was selected: Rian, the astronaut who first saw the signal, Captain Hale, a stern soldier with cold eyes, 2 engineers, and Ilara, the only scientist aboard. They launched in silence, no media, no broadcast. Only the stars watched as the ship left Earth's shadow. The journey to Drakkern took weeks. As they traveled, the signal grew louder. It was no longer just a pattern. It was a pulse they could almost feel in their bones. Sometimes, when the crew slept, the lights flickered without reason. Sometimes, when Ilara closed her eyes, she saw wings brushing against the edges of her dreams. Captain Hale grew restless. "I do not like this," he muttered one night, staring at the blackness beyond the window. "This feels like we are walking into the mouth of something alive." Rian, who had stopped sleeping well, only nodded. The deeper they went into space, the stranger it became. Stars flickered in unnatural ways. Planets drifted where no planets should be. Then, one day the Horizon Dawn entered the Drakkern system. It was a place of ruin. The star was red and dying, its light weak and sickly. Around it floated the broken remains of moons and cities that no longer lived. The sensors picked up fragments of structures, towers half buried in frozen dust, ships turned to stone. "Something terrible happened here," Ilara whispered as the crew watched the dead system pass beneath them. But their mission was only beginning. The signal pointed them to a massive rift on the third planet, a crack that stretched across its surface like a wound. They descended slowly, the engines humming softly in the thin air. As they approached, the temperature dropped and the signal became a roar. It was not sound, it was vibration, deep and old, shaking the bones of the ship. The crew strapped in, but Rian kept his eyes on the black abyss below. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "It's like breathing." The rift opened wider as they neared it, dust falling away as if something beneath was waking up. The ground trembled. Rocks split apart, sending clouds of ash into the cold sky. And then, for the first time, they saw it. A shape moved far below, something massive, something alive. Scales like obsidian mountains. Wings folded like continents. It was not fully awake, but it was there, and it was older than everything around it. Ilara's breath caught. Her hands trembled as the instruments on the ship flickered and went dark for 3 seconds. "Power surge," the engineer shouted. "Systems are being jammed." The captain gripped his chair, his jaw tight. "Stay steady," he ordered, though his voice shook. The ship hovered over the crack as a massive eye opened below them, a slit of golden fire that burned through the darkness. It was looking at them. No radar, no weapon, just a gaze so heavy it felt like gravity itself. And then they heard the voice, not in the air, but in their minds. "Who answered?" it said, the words like thunder wrapped in whispers. The crew froze. The captain reached for his weapon, but it was useless here. Ilara stepped forward, her voice barely more than a breath. I did." The eye blinked slowly. The ground rumbled. The dragon, if it was a dragon, shifted its massive body. The crust of the planet groaned as it stretched its wings, each scale glowing faintly like stars awakening after a long night. The ship's sensors went wild, but the crew could not look away. The dragon did not attack. It only watched, and when it spoke again, the air itself seemed to grow heavier. "You came," it said. "Then you will carry our words." Ilara swallowed hard. What do you want from us?" she asked. The dragon's head rose slowly, its horns scraping the edge of the rift. Dust rained down like falling ash. "Not what we want," it answered. "What we remember." The captain's hand hovered over the controls, ready to flee, but the dragon's gaze held the ship like chains. The planet shook once more, and from far across the horizon, other rifts began to glow. More eyes opened, small at first, then larger, stretching across the dead land like stars coming alive. The dragons were waking. One by one, their roars joined the echo that filled the system, a soundless thunder that reached across the void and touched Earth's skies. Back home, the signal spiked to its highest point yet, bright enough to paint the night with faint lines of fire. People woke up screaming, claiming they heard wings in their dreams. The governments tried to calm them, but they had lost control. Something ancient had been set in motion, and now it was too late to stop. The horizon dawn floated above the great rift, silent and small before the awakening titans. Ilara felt the weight of their gaze press against her soul. They had called, and now they knew who had answered. The horizon dawn floated in silence above the cracked world of Drakern, its engines whispering weakly as the crew stared into the abyss below. The great rift glowed faintly like a scar across the planet, and somewhere deep inside that wound something alive had opened its eye. They had seen it, golden fire in the shape of an ancient gaze that felt older than their species. For long minutes no one spoke, only the slow sound of the ship's hull creaking under unseen pressure. Then the vibration came again, stronger this time, rolling through their bones like the heartbeat of a giant. Rian gripped the edge of the console, sweat running down his neck. "It's moving," he whispered. The ground below shifted like a sea under a storm. Dust spiraled into the thin air, forming great dark clouds that curled and twisted without wind. From that storm a shape began to rise, slow and immense, its body shedding fragments of stone as if the planet itself had tried to bury it. Scales black as obsidian caught the weak red light of the dying sun. A neck longer than their ship uncoiled from the rift. Two horns, curved like ancient swords, scraped the broken cliffs as the creature lifted its head fully for the first time in ages. It was a dragon, not a myth, not a shadow, but a living being vast enough to blot out the horizon. Its wings were folded against its body, each membrane stretched like a sail of midnight. When it breathed, the dust swirled away as though afraid. Ilara could not move. Her heart hammered in her chest, her mouth dry as sand. This was no dream, no transmission. This was real. The dragon's eyes burned brighter, turning their glass canopy into gold. Then the voice returned, deep and heavy, echoing inside their skulls without sound. "Who answered our call?" it asked, its gaze scanning the small vessel like a predator searching for the one brave or foolish enough to speak. The crew froze. Captain Hale's hand hovered near his sidearm, though he knew it would do nothing. The engineers held their breath, faces pale. Rian looked at Elara. She felt the weight of their stares, but the dragon's stare was heavier. She stepped forward, her voice a thin thread. "I did," she said. The dragon's head lowered, massive jaws parting slightly as if tasting her words. Its teeth were like pillars of glass, its breath a cold wind that carried the scent of stone and ash. "Human," the voice whispered, not in insult but in recognition. "You heard the echo when others hid their ears." "Why?" Elara swallowed. "Because I wanted to understand. Because your call reached us, and I could not ignore it." For a moment the dragon said nothing. The air thickened, the ship's lights flickered. Then a deep rumble rose from its chest, a sound that was neither growl nor roar, something older, a vibration that carried memory. "Long have we slept," the dragon said slowly. "Long have the stars burned without our wings. Now you have come, and the chains of silence break." Behind it the rift widened, cracks stretching across the black land as distant shapes moved. More dragons, smaller perhaps but still immense, stirred in their stone prisons. Their scales glimmered faintly, their roars muffled by the ancient crust. "What do you want from us?" Captain Hale asked, his voice forced through clenched teeth. "Are you here to attack our world?" The dragon turned its golden eyes to him, and for a heartbeat the soldier shrank like a child beneath that gaze. "Attack?" the dragon echoed, its tone dark and amused. "You speak as those before you spoke. Fear before truth. We do not seek your world, little human. We seek what was promised and broken." Elara stepped forward again, the cold floor trembling beneath her boots. "Promised by who?" she asked. The dragon's neck arched high, its silhouette blotting out the dim sun. "The ones you call the council," it said. "They betrayed us, and the stars turned cold." Rian glanced at Elara, his voice tight. "The Galactic Council? That's impossible. They said dragons were legends, myths from before their time." The dragon's tail lashed against the cliffs, sending shards of rock into the air. "Legends are only truths buried under cowardice," it said. "They feared what they could not bind. They sealed our kind in worlds of ash, and they erased our names from their history." The crew listened, silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down like the low gravity was trying to crush them. Elara felt the pieces shift in her mind. The signal, the call, the urgency, it was not a warning. It was a summons. "Why call us now?" she asked softly. "Because," the dragon said, lowering its head until its eye filled their window, "the chains are breaking. The stars stir with war again, and you are not ready." Its gaze flicked over their fragile vessel, the thin metal that carried their lives. "Yet you came. That is enough." The ship's alarms beeped weakly as energy fields spiked around them. The dragon stretched one wing halfway, a wall of black that caught the dying light like a curtain. "You will carry our words," it said again, its tone final. "Tell your world the sky will soon change. Tell them the forgotten have not forgiven." Elara felt her hands clench. "And if they do not listen?" The dragon's jaw tightened. "Then they will hear our roar." Suddenly the ground beneath them cracked open wider, a wave of force pushing the ship back into the thin air. More dragons rose from the depths, some small as mountains, others larger than cities, their eyes lighting one by one like suns waking from a long sleep. The roar that followed was silent in space but deafening in the mind, 1,000 voices carried on the same ancient bond. The horizon dawn shook as the crew scrambled to regain control. "Pull us out," Captain Hale barked. The engines flared, lifting them higher into the weak atmosphere, but Elara kept her gaze locked on the first dragon, the one who spoke. It did not move to stop them. It only watched, its golden eyes burning with something that was not anger, Not yet, but a memory of it. As they broke orbit, the signal changed once more, filling every channel with a single image. The same dragon, now awake, its wings spread across the dying star. Back on Earth, people stared at their screens as the image appeared everywhere. On phones, on satellites, even on power grids. Children cried, elders whispered prayers, and leaders demanded answers. Ilara sat in her cabin, the hum of the ship around her, her mind racing. They had found the dragons, or perhaps the dragons had allowed themselves to be found. And now, something had been set in motion. There was no going back. Somewhere behind them, the first dragon lifted its head fully into the thin sky, its wings unfolding for the first time in 1,000 years, and its roar stretched across the void like a storm waiting to arrive. The horizon dawn cut through the dark of space like a wounded bird carrying secrets too heavy for its wings. The crew said little as the ship slipped past dying stars and broken moons, leaving the Drakern system behind. The dragons had spoken, their roars still echoing in the minds of those who had heard them. Ilara sat in her cabin, staring at the faint burn mark on her wrist where the control panel had sparked during the awakening. It had not healed. It pulsed sometimes, in rhythm with the memory of that ancient voice. Captain Hale walked the narrow corridors with stiff shoulders, his jaw tight, his eyes colder than the stars outside. Rian avoided sleep, afraid of the wings that brushed his dreams. Weeks passed in tense silence until Earth's pale blue glow finally filled the ship's window. But they were not alone. Far behind, just at the edge of detection, shadows moved, massive, slow, and patient. The dragons had followed, not in ships of metal but as living titans sliding between starlight. They made no sound, no sign of chase, yet their presence was a weight pressing against the void. "They are watching us," Rian whispered one night as the sensors flickered again. "No," Ilara replied quietly. "They are deciding." When the horizon dawn finally entered Earth's orbit, the welcome was cold. Warships surrounded them, sleek and armed, their gun ports glowing faintly. A voice filled the cabin. "Crew of Horizon Dawn, you are to be taken to Secure Command for debriefing. No public contact allowed." They were escorted under guard to a council hidden deep beneath the mountains, a place where the air smelled of iron and secrecy. The leaders waited, their faces pale from sleepless nights. The signal had not stopped, it had grown stronger during their absence. Now the dragon image hung over Earth like a ghost, faint in the night sky, visible even to the naked eye on clear evenings. "What did you find?" the director asked, his fingers tight on the table. "Myths." Captain Hale started to speak of dead planets and rifts, but Ilara stepped forward, her voice firm. "They are real. Dragons. Ancient, alive, and awake. They called, and now they are watching." The room fell silent, the hum of machines the only sound. "Do they want war?" another leader asked, his tone sharp with fear. Ilara hesitated. "Not yet. They want to speak. They want their story carried to us. They want us to remember a promise that was broken." Murmurs rippled across the council. Some scoffed, others paled. "The council," Ilara continued, "the one we think protects the galaxy, they betrayed the dragons long ago. Buried them in ash, erased their name. And now the dragons remember." The room grew heavy, filled with the kind of silence that comes before storms. "If this is true," the director said slowly, "then we are already in danger. If we do nothing, they may strike. If we act first, we may trigger something worse." Arguments erupted. Generals demanded weapons be prepared, satellites armed, the skies filled with defense grids. Scientists warned that their weapons had no guarantee against creatures that could survive in the heart of a dying star. Through it all, Ilara listened and felt the weight of the dragon's gaze still lingering like a shadow in her mind. That night, unable to sleep, she walked to the edge of the mountain facility and stared at the stars. The cold air bit her skin. And there it was, just above the horizon, a faint shape like a dark wing spread across the night. Not a ship, not a cloud. A dragon watching from the void. "Why follow me?" she whispered into the dark. The air did not answer, but deep inside her, a whisper rose. "Because you spoke." Days turned to weeks, and the world grew restless. News leaked, fragments of truth twisted by fear. Some called Ilara a traitor, others a savior. Protests rose in cities. Military fleets began quiet preparations. And then the dragons acted. One night, as storms rolled over the Atlantic, a ripple of fireless light swept across the sky. Satellites blinked out one by one. Ocean sensors recorded a shadow stretching hundreds of miles, then vanishing into the clouds. The next morning, every screen on Earth flickered with a single image, a dragon's eye, calm and golden, and beneath it a message translated in dozens of languages, "Send the one who answered." Ilara was summoned again. This time there was no debate. The council placed her aboard a small diplomatic vessel, guarded by warships but alone in purpose. They sent her to the edge of the atmosphere where the first dragon waited, coiled like a black moon above the planet's curve. Its size was even greater here, its scales catching the sunlight like dark fire. As her ship approached, the warships kept their distance, their weapons primed but their crews whispering prayers. The dragon did not move until her voice filled the channel. "I am here," she said, her words steady despite the cold in her stomach. The dragon's head turned slowly, its golden eye filling the viewport. "You came," it said in her mind. "Then we will speak." The ship trembled as a beam of unseen energy wrapped around it, pulling it gently toward the beast. The crew panicked, hands on controls, but Ilara raised her hand. "Do not fight it," she whispered. The dragon carried them to a place no one had seen, a fortress drifting above Earth, hidden in the folds of space, made of black stone and scales that shimmered with starlight. It was neither fully real nor fully ghost, a relic of a time before human memory. "This," the dragon said, "is where the pact will begin." Inside, the walls pulsed faintly with heat, the air heavy with old power. Dragons of different sizes coiled in silence, their eyes watching as Ilara stepped forward. "You speak for your kind," the first dragon said. "You heard our call when others turned away. Now you will carry our words or carry their wrath." Ilara's heart pounded. "What words?" she asked. The dragon lowered its head until its breath washed over her like cold wind. "The truth," it said. "Tell your world the stars will burn again. Tell them the forgotten rise. And tell them this, there is still a choice." The fortress trembled as distant roars echoed, not in anger, but in warning. Ilara realized this was not just a threat. It was an offer. A pact of fire waiting to be made. One step forward, and humanity could gain the might of dragons as allies. One step back, and the sky would turn to ash. She looked up at the golden eye and nodded slowly. "I will tell them," she said, though her voice shook. The dragon blinked once, a slow curtain of light. "Then go," it said. "The next call will not wait." As her ship was released and drifted back toward Earth, the warships scrambled around her, trying to track the fortress that faded like smoke. The world below waited with cold breath. Ilara closed her eyes, the echo of that ancient roar still burning in her veins. The pact had been offered. Now humanity had to decide if it would hold it, or break it. The ship descended through the thick blue layers of Earth's sky, its engines humming low as the world below prepared for answers it did not want to hear. Ilara stood near the viewport, her fingers pressed against the cold glass as cities came into view, their lights flickering like nervous eyes staring back at the heavens. Behind her, the warships moved in tight formations, their weapons armed but their crews silent, because they all felt it, the presence that followed them like a shadow. Somewhere above, hidden in the folds of night, the dragons waited. They did not roar, they did not strike, but their silence was a weight that pressed on every mind. The council greeted Ilara with forced calm, their faces pale beneath harsh lights as they escorted her once again into the mountain chamber where the fate of nations trembled on polished floors. "Did you bring their demands?" the director asked, his voice clipped, his fingers drumming against the table as if each tap was a warning. Ilara placed a small black device on the table, its surface etched with the pattern the dragon had given her. "This is their message," she said. The lights dimmed as the device activated, projecting a simple image, the golden eye of the first dragon, unblinking, calm. And then the voice filled the room, not loud, but heavy, like the sound of a storm far away that you know is coming. Humanity has been called. The forgotten rise. Choose your path, speak with us, or fall with those who betrayed. The message ended, leaving silence behind, but that silence was sharper than any shout. The council erupted into debate. Some argued for peace, others for immediate war. Generals demanded plans to strike the dragons before they became too many. Scientists warned that their power could not be measured, that even the greatest weapons might only wake their anger. Ilara tried to speak, but her words drowned in the storm of fear. They do not want war, she said again and again. They want truth. They want their story to be known. But truth was a fragile thing in halls built on control. That night, as the council argued, a shadow crossed the moon. Civilians looked up and gasped as a shape like a vast wing blotted the silver light for just a heartbeat, then vanished. Panic spread online. Old myths came alive. Children whispered of dragons in their dreams. Farmers found strange ash on their fields where no fire had burned. Ilara moved through the streets under guard, her name already whispered with fear by those who thought she had brought the monsters here. She kept her eyes on the sky. Somewhere above, she felt them. The dragons had not left. They were watching. Days passed, and pressure built. The council ordered a fleet to circle the planet, its purpose called defense, but everyone knew it was a threat wrapped in steel. Satellites were armed with warheads. Codes were prepared to strike first if the shadow in the sky ever took shape again. Ilara was summoned to meet them one last time before their decision. "We cannot live with this sword above our heads," a general said, his voice cold. "If they will not leave, we must make them." Ilara's hands tightened. "Attack them, and you will invite your own destruction," she replied. "You think they followed us because they fear you? No. They followed because they gave us a chance." Her words were ignored. Plans moved forward. That night, under the cover of dark, the first missile was launched, not to strike but to test, to see if the dragons would react. The weapon burned through the upper atmosphere and vanished in the shadowed clouds. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, at dawn, the sky turned red. Not from fire, but from light, thin, burning lines stretching across the horizon like veins of a sleeping giant awakening. Cities stopped. Radios went dead for 3 minutes. The air smelled of iron. And then a single roar rolled across the planet, not heard by ears but felt by every beating heart. People fell to their knees without knowing why. The dragons had answered. Ilara woke to find the mountain base surrounded by silent storms. The screens showed nothing but static. And then, slowly, a shape began to appear in orbit, a dragon the size of a city, its body coiled like a serpent of midnight, its wings stretched wider than the clouds. It did not strike. It did not move. It only watched. The council panicked. Some demanded more weapons. Others wanted to open talks at once. Ilara stood in the middle of the chaos, the dragon's eye still burned in her mind. She knew this was their warning, not their attack. They had given Earth a choice, and Earth had answered with suspicion and hidden blades. Now the game had changed. That night, while the world slept uneasy, a quiet message reached Ilara through her private channel, a voice deep and low, the same she had heard in the stars. "The pact trembles," it said. "The shadow grows long. Tell them, the next dawn will not wait." She sat alone in the dark, the city lights trembling far below her window, and wondered if humanity still had time to turn away from the fire that now circled its sky. The world woke to a tense dawn, the sky still marked by faint red lines where the dragons had passed during the night. Fear ruled the cities now, whispers of war spilling from every street corner as people looked upward instead of forward. Governments assured calm, but their fleets moved like wolves in the dark, their weapons warming in secret orbits. In the hidden mountain facility, Ilara stood before the council one final time, her voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "Do not strike," she begged. "They have not harmed us. They only watch." The director's eyes were cold as winter stone. "And when will they stop watching? When they swallow our skies?" When they break our towers. Generals shifted in their seats, their fingers tapping restless codes against the table. They had already chosen. Hours later, as the sun climbed over the horizon, a fleet of warships rose with it, their thrusters cutting white scars into the morning clouds. The world was told it was a patrol. It was not. It was a spear aimed at the shadow above. Ilara was locked in her quarters as the missiles were armed. Rian tried to reach her, but guards blocked his path, their faces pale with the same fear they claimed to fight. The order was given just before noon. A single command line carried through satellites, and the sky cracked open with fire. The first missile struck the edge of the great dragon's wing, a flash like lightning against midnight scales. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The dragon did not move. The fleets cheered quietly, believing they had wounded it. And then the air turned heavy. Winds rose where there had been none. Clouds spiraled backward, folding like curtains pulled by unseen claws. The dragon slowly lifted its head, its golden eyes burning across the atmosphere. There was no roar this time. There was silence, deep, ancient, and crushing. One by one, the ships lost power. Lights flickered, engines stuttered, systems failed as if the very laws of nature had bent against them. Pilots screamed into dead channels as their machines drifted powerless above the earth they had sworn to protect. From the mountains, Ilara broke free of her locked room as alarms wailed through the base. She ran to the command deck where the council stared at their dying fleet. "You fools," she whispered. "You woke them." Outside, the red lines in the sky thickened, twisting like veins of fire. More shadows appeared at the edge of the atmosphere, vast wings folding and unfolding with slow grace. The dragons had not come in anger before. Now they came awake. The first dragon moved, its body stretching across the sky like a living eclipse. Its wings stirred the air, knocking warships from their courses without a single strike. Missiles launched, burned, and vanished in black light before touching scale. The cities below fell silent, people flooding the streets to watch the sky burn without flame. "They are not attacking," Rian said quietly, watching the chaos from a secure balcony. "They are showing us what they can do without trying." Ilara stood beside him, her face pale. "This is the price of our first strike," she said. "This is their warning before war." The council sent messages of apology, offers of talks, but the dragons did not answer. Their silence was a cage. Hours passed as the fleets floated helpless. Power grids flickered across continents. Water rose in the harbors as tides shifted under strange forces. Birds fell quiet. Children cried without knowing why. And then, at dusk, the dragon finally spoke again, its voice crawling through every device, every speaker, every heart. "You drew first blood," it said, calm as stone. "Now the choice is no longer yours alone." The words struck harder than any missile. The world listened in frozen fear as the voice faded, leaving behind a sky that no longer felt like home. That night, fires burned in hidden places as panic turned to unrest. Leaders argued behind closed doors, some demanding surrender, others demanding vengeance. But the truth was plain, their weapons had failed. Their pride had failed. And somewhere above, in the shadows between stars, more dragons were moving. Ilara sat alone in her quarters as the mountain trembled faintly, the echo of wings passing overhead. She thought of the first message, the call that had sounded like a whisper from the past. "We are waiting." Now they no longer waited. They were here. Rian entered quietly, his face lined with fear and resolve. "They will blame you," he said softly. "They already whisper it, scientist, traitor, dragon's voice." She looked up, her hands clenched. "Let them. The truth does not care for blame." Outside, the night deepened, but the stars did not shine as they once had. Shadows moved among them, slow and patient, and the world finally understood that it had stepped into a storm it could not control. The dragons had been offered a chance for peace. Humanity had answered with fire. Now the skies belonged to something far older and far less forgiving. The days after the attack felt like a long winter without cold, a stillness heavy enough to press on every heart as the dragons circled the sky with patient, unblinking eyes. Cities tried to pretend life continued, but no one believed the lies on the screens. Schools were closed in many places, trade slowed to a crawl, and every conversation ended with someone glancing upward. The great dragon still hung in low orbit, a dark crescent against the fading moon, and its companions moved like silent storms at the edges of the horizon. No strikes had followed the first retaliation, but the world felt conquered all the same. Elara moved through empty hallways of the mountain base as leaders argued in locked chambers, their words sharp with blame and fear. Some demanded an immediate surrender to whatever will the dragons had, others called for hidden weapons, secret arsenals long kept for impossible wars. "We are not beaten," a general shouted one evening, his voice breaking over the secured channel. "They have shown power, yes, but power does not mean we kneel." His words were strong, but his hands trembled on the table. Outside the cities, strange signs began to appear. Fields where crops grew too fast, rivers that ran slower than their season, flocks of birds changing paths overnight as if obeying new laws written in the air. Scientists whispered of a subtle shift, a reshaping of nature itself wherever the dragons lingered. It was not destruction, it was rearrangement, slow but sure. Rian walked with Elara through the mountain's observation deck one night as stars flickered behind moving shadows. "They are changing our world," he said softly. "Not with fire. With presence." Elara nodded, her face pale in the glass reflection. "They warned us. They gave us choice. We answered with missiles. Now they write their answer in our sky." The council grew desperate. They called for a second fleet, this time one they would not admit existed, a line of warships built to fight in silence, equipped with weapons banned by every treaty. Orders spread in coded whispers. Crews were gathered from distant bases, sworn to secrecy with promises of honor and survival. But fear leaks like smoke. Civilians began to protest, their voices rising across the networks. "No more war," they cried. "No more secrets." Yet others shouted for strength, for vengeance, for a strike that would wipe the sky clean. Families split, cities divided, allies turned cold. The dragons watched it all without a word. On the 7th night after the first attack, a shadow crossed the largest city of the eastern continent. It was not the great dragon, but a smaller one, its wings silent as fog, its scales reflecting city lights like broken glass. It hovered for less than a minute, then vanished into the clouds, leaving behind no destruction, only a deep mark on every watching heart. Children dreamed of it. Soldiers swore it whispered in their sleep. Elara received a private message again, the same low voice she had heard before. "The window closes," it said. "Your kind stands between truth and ruin. Choose." She read the message again and again as the mountain rumbled faintly with distant quakes. Rian urged her to speak to the world, to go beyond the council's walls. "They do not trust them," he said. "But they still trust you. You brought the call. Maybe you can stop the storm." She wanted to believe him. But outside, the fleets moved again, this time slower, hidden among shadows. The dragons knew. Everyone knew. The question was who would move first. That dawn, a great light spread across the northern sea as the first covert strike failed in silence. A fleet had vanished without a trace, their signals gone in a single pulse of dark energy. No wreckage, no cries, only a calm report from the dragons sent across the networks. "We remove the blades you hide. No more." Panic followed. Markets crashed, leaders vanished from screens, and ordinary people locked their doors as if walls could guard against wings. In the streets, rumors became truth faster than truth could move. Some said the dragons planned to rule the earth. Others said they would burn it clean for something older. A few whispered that they had come to protect it from something worse, something still far away. Elara did not know which was true, but she knew the moment was breaking. In the mountain's lowest chamber, she found the old beacon they had used to answer the call in the first place. Dust covered its panels, but its heart still hummed faintly. Rian joined her, his face drawn. "If you reach them," he asked, "what will you say?" She stared at the dark ceiling, at the faint tremble of the earth under a distant wing beat. "I will say we are not all like them," she whispered. "I will say we still want to listen." Above, the sky turned pale gold as the great dragon moved once more, its body blotting constellations as it crossed the morning sun. This time, it did not wait. A deep hum filled the air across continents as towers flickered, power grids dimmed, and ancient codes unlocked themselves in military vaults without a single human hand. The dragons were no longer only watching. They were acting. And humanity, for the first time, felt truly small beneath the weight of their wings. The world stood on the edge of a silent cliff as the eighth dawn rose under a golden sky that no longer felt like its own. The dragons had not burned cities or shattered armies. They had done worse in a way no weapon ever could. They had made humanity feel powerless. Satellites spun out of orbit without warning, fleets floated like dead husks above the oceans, and the great dragon's shadow now touched every continent in slow circles that never broke. Elara sat in the council hall again, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights, as leaders shouted over one another with words that no longer mattered. Some demanded surrender, others screamed for a final war, but none could explain how war could work when the enemy had already unmade the very tools they relied upon. Rian stood behind her, silent, his hand resting on the old beacon she had uncovered. "It still works," he said quietly, "but if you use it now, the whole world will hear." She stared at the beacon, its faint hum like a heartbeat waiting for a choice. Outside, cities cracked under their own fear. Food lines stretched for blocks, protests turned to riots, and some nations fell into chaos as old rivals used the silence to settle forgotten grudges. But above it all, the dragons still waited, their eyes bright as suns in the dark sky. That evening, as dusk bled into night, the great dragon finally descended lower than ever before. Its wings spanned the entire western horizon, its shadow swallowing a city's lights in a single sweep. It spoke not in threat, but in calm that felt colder than any storm. "We will not repeat what you have broken," it said, its voice carried on every channel, every speaker, every trembling heart. "You have drawn blood. You have hidden blades. Now your kind must choose, yield and remain, or fight and vanish." The message ended, leaving behind a world that no longer whispered, it shouted, it argued, it wept. Some saw surrender as slavery, others as survival. Armies prepared for a final strike, gathering what little still worked, while families fled inland, praying that mountains or deserts might hide them from the sky. Elara knew there was no hiding. She climbed to the highest deck of the mountain base, the old beacon in her hands, and looked at the stars one last time. Rian followed her, his face drawn with resolve and fear. "If you speak for them," he said, "they may listen. But if you speak wrong, we all pay." She nodded, her hands shaking as the beacon warmed to life, sending a pulse across the heavens. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the air thickened, and the great dragon turned its golden eyes toward her mountain. A light descended like a slow meteor, stopping just above the summit. It was not fire, it was presence, a pressure that made her bones ache and her breath short. "You called again," the voice said, quieter this time, almost curious. Elara forced her voice steady. "We called in hope, not in war. We wanted to learn. Some chose fear. They struck you. I did not." The light shimmered, growing darker at its edges. "One voice does not erase a strike," the dragon said. "One heart does not heal a wound." She stepped forward, the wind tearing at her coat. "Then let me heal it. Let me speak for those who would listen. Let me stand between your wrath and their fear." The dragon was silent for a long time. Below them, the world kept breaking itself in confusion. Fleets prepared to launch. Missiles waited for a signal. Streets burned with arguments no one could win. Finally, the voice came again, deep as mountains. "You cannot stop what comes," it said. "But you may guide how deep it cuts." The light vanished, leaving only the faint glow of distant wings in the upper sky. Rian exhaled, his breath shaking. "What does that mean?" he asked. Elara did not answer. She only held the beacon tighter and looked at the horizon where red storms began to gather over the northern sea. Somewhere out there, the Second Fleet still waited, hidden under clouds, its commanders ready to strike at a moment's order. They did not know that the dragons had marked them already. Night fell heavy, and for the first time, humanity knew that its last choice would not be made in open light. It would be made in the dark, between surrender and fire, between pride and survival, between the old world and the one now unfolding beneath wings older than their sun. The world held its breath as the ninth night came with clouds heavy like iron and winds that whispered of storms not born from nature. In the frozen silence above the northern sea, the hidden fleet moved at last, its engines dark, its hulls masked by the last technology Earth had to hide from the dragons. Commanders spoke in low voices, their orders wrapped in secrecy and fear as they prepared to strike before dawn. They carried weapons designed to break what could not be broken, to pierce scales older than their cities, and to scatter wings that had never known defeat. Ilara watched the data feed from the mountain base, her face pale under the cold lights. She had warned them, she had begged the council to wait, but they had listened to louder voices, those who believed one last strike would make the sky theirs again. Rian stood beside her, hands clenched. "They do not want peace," he said bitterly. "They want to feel powerful one more time." Outside, the wind howled through the peaks as the beacon on her desk flickered with a faint pulse, the echo of the dragon's presence. She touched it, unsure if it would answer again. Hours passed, the fleet moved closer to its target, the great dragon that drifted low over the northern sea, its wings folded like continents, its eyes closed as if in sleep. The plan was cruel and simple: unleash the hidden arsenal of dark lances, strike before the dragons could sense it, then scatter before the retaliation. But the dragons were never blind. As the first wave prepared to launch, a hum spread through the sky, a vibration that crawled along steel and bone. One by one the fleet's cloaks failed, their lights blinking into existence like a string of doomed stars. A single voice filled every channel, at once calm and endless. "We warned you," the dragon said. "Yet you raised the blade again." Panic tore through the fleet. Some captains fired early, others fled, but it was too late. From the clouds shapes unfolded, enormous wings shimmering with strange light, their bodies moving without sound, but with weight that bent the air. The first human missiles rose like sparks, then vanished in silence, swallowed by fields no one understood. Then came the answer, not fire, not thunder, but a ripple that turned metal to dust. Ships broke apart without flames, their crews frozen in the cold sea below. Ilara watched in horror as signal after signal winked out from the screen. "Stop them," she whispered, though there was no one to hear her words. Rian gripped her shoulder, his eyes fixed on the fading lights. "This was their choice," he said. "But we will all pay." Across the world, people woke to the sight of falling stars, the remains of a fleet that never truly fought. Governments scrambled to explain, but the truth spread faster than lies. This was the last strike, and it had failed without a single dragon harmed. In the ruins of the northern sea, the great dragon rose, its wings spreading wider than dawn, its shadow stretching across 3 nations. It spoke again, this time with weight that shook the mountains. "Your blades are gone," it said. "Your storms are broken. There will be no third strike." Cities went silent as its voice faded, leaving only the sound of distant waters. In the mountain base, Ilara turned to the beacon, its glow steady now, as if waiting. "They will not stop until they rule," Rian said quietly. "Or until nothing remains to rule." Ilara shook her head, her mind racing. "No," she whispered. "There is still something they want. They could have burned us. They did not." She sent a signal, then not to the council, not to the broken fleets, but to the dragons themselves, a single message carried on the same frequency as the first call. "Meet me," it said. "Not to fight. To end this." Night deepened, the world trembled, and far above the clouds a shadow turned its golden eyes toward the mountain where one human still dared to speak. The world lay quiet under a heavy sky as the final dawn came, with a pale sun hidden behind the wings of giants. The fleet was gone, the seas were filled with silent wrecks, and the cities below watched the heavens with hollow eyes. No one cheered, no one marched, only waiting remained, like the stillness before a storm that would never pass. Ilara stood on the highest platform of the mountain base, her breath white in the cold air, the beacon warm in her hands. She had sent the call, and the answer had come not in fire but in silence. A shape larger than mountains descended from the clouds, its wings folding as it landed upon the plain below, the peaks, its golden eyes fixed on her alone. "You called," the dragon said, its voice soft yet filling the valley. Rian stood beside her, his face set with grim resolve. "If this fails," he whispered, "there will be no one left to speak." Elara stepped forward, the wind pulling at her coat as she raised the beacon. "We have nothing left to fight with," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that turned her heart to stone. "And nothing left to lose but ourselves. You could have ended us. You did not. Tell me why." The dragon tilted its head, the motion slow like shifting continents. "Because we remember," it said. "Long before your kind rose we burned 1,000 worlds. We were fire without thought. We swore never again to unmake what still can change." Its words rippled through the air, reaching the distant towns, the hidden bunkers, the broken ships. "Then let us change," Elara said. "Not with weapons, not with lies. Let us learn from you. Let us build what we broke." The dragon's gaze narrowed, and for a moment the mountain seemed to tremble beneath its stare. "And if your kind strikes again?" it asked. "If fear rises, as it always has?" She lowered the beacon. "Then I will stand in their path. I will speak until they hear, or until I fall." Silence followed, a deep long silence that stretched from the snowfields to the seas where the wreckage still floated. Then the dragon spoke again. "One voice does not make a world," it said. "But one voice can open a door." It unfurled its wings, and the sky filled with light as more shapes appeared in the clouds, smaller dragons, some as large as towers, others like shadows dancing on the wind. They did not descend with claws, they circled with purpose, forming lines in the air that shimmered like paths of gold. "Come," the great dragon said. "Walk among us. Learn what was lost. Teach what must remain." Rian looked at Elara, his expression torn between fear and a fragile hope. "If you go," he said quietly, "they will call you traitor." She nodded. "If I do not," she replied, "there may be no world left to betray." She stepped down the mountain path, the snow crunching beneath her boots, as the first of the dragons lowered its great neck to meet her eyes. Its breath was warm, not with fire, but with a strange calm that smelled of storms far away. Across the world people watched the broadcast sent from the beacon, some wept, some raged, but many simply stared, unable to believe that the war had ended, not with a scream but with a choice. Days turned to weeks as Elara spoke for humanity, in the halls of the dragons, sharing names, stories, wounds, and promises. The dragons did not rule the cities, nor did they leave. They became watchers above the clouds, teaching the skies how to breathe again, while humans rebuilt from the ashes. Not all trusted the peace, many still plotted in shadows, but for the first time the stars did not feel like prison bars, they felt like doors waiting to open. One evening as the sun bled red over the horizon, Rian joined Elara on the high deck where it had all begun. "Do you think they will keep their word?" he asked. She looked at the faint silhouettes drifting beyond the clouds. "I think they already have," she said. "Now, it is our turn." Far above a great shadow moved, but it did not threaten, it guarded. The world was scarred, the fleets were gone, the councils broken, yet the sky no longer burned, it whispered. And in that whisper humanity found something it had nearly forgotten, not victory, not surrender, but the chance to rise again.